morning, YouTube. OMG. I'm just making sure all of the things are thinking. I haven't been on YouTube in four and ever. OMG. What's been going on, world? Good morning, sunshines. Good morning, universe. Good morning, YouTube. Hey, y'all. Hey. Anywho, how y'all been? I miss YouTube a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit. Um, yeah, I have no idea what's happening in YouTube sphere generally. Um, if you are, well, you're going to be watching this on replay because it's early on a Sunday morning, and I needed to get this out of the way. It was something that I wanted to do because I started well, I pretty much think I've been on my mindfulness journey my whole life, but like intentionally and understanding what was happening kind of started this summer with really for sure the Seeing Beautiful Again book series that I was reading. And so now I've been going in a bunch of different directions. If you have been on my channel, you know that I've started a new job. I have a son who is a senior in high school. So life is absolutely lifing over here. Over here, it's doing its thing. Yesterday was homecoming for him. So that was an exciting day. Well, it's been an exciting month trying to get him to get it together. Um, but yeah, so it's homecoming time. They had their game on Friday. Of course, I was extra. I had made my own jersey and I put his name and I put mom underneath it. So that was fun. And then the district that he's in is my old district. So a lot of the kids at the game knew who I was. So that was exciting to see all my former classroom babies in one place. Other than that, my new job is jobbing. It's doing its thing, it's stinging. I love it and it's challenging and it's absolutely what I needed. And so, with that said, I am starting. I think I told you guys, a lot of you guys, at least, if you've been with me for a minute, that the Kendrick Lamar CD is really, 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 really on like repeat, repeat, repeat. And it has been since it was released sometime mid this year. It had to happen. When did his album get released? March, April, Mayish? I know I was still in the classroom teaching and I was talking about it with my eighth grade kids. So sometime in there. Anyway, it's been on high repeat for me. And so one of the people that he introduced me to, and other people probably knew about this person way in advance. From what I'm learning, this person became really famous because of Oprah Winfrey. I wasn't awakened yet, so I wasn't really tuned in or paying attention. But one of the people that Kendrick introduces us to is Eckhart Tolle. Tolle. And so I got the series of books from Eckhart. And so I am going to start with The Power of Now. And I will come here. At first, I was going to start reading it yesterday while I was waiting on my son to get ready. And then I was like, well, I feel like I want to take this to my YouTube audience just because the devotionals that I did this summer and some of that deep work, I hope at least it resonated with at least one other being that is humaning right now. And so I wanted to put this book in my space for the very same reasons that I did some of that book work with you guys this summer. So today I am going to start with The Power of Now, a guide to spiritual enlightenment. I am not going to read the new preface by Eckhart Tolle. I am going to start with the intro and I'm going to see if I can get through the first three chapters. We'll see. Um, on the front of the book, it says one of the best books to come along in years. Every sentence rings with truth and power. Deepak Chopra, who is the author of The Seven Spiritual Laws of Success. I have not read that. I probably should. We'll get there. I listen, it's a lot. Plus, I got books at work I have to read, y'all. And those books for work, I y'all don't y'all not really. I wouldn't be interested. I'm not trying. Oh, sorry, Mike. I wouldn't be interested in reading them to you guys because it's like teaching how to help teachers teach it. How to one of them that it really is good though, it's about dignity. There's there's a little bit of a disconnect with the world and the dignity that it affords to teachers and the education community itself at large. So one of the books we are reading as an admin team is about dignity. So we'll see. I might bring some of those thoughts to you without reading those whole books. But this stuff, the spiritual work, I do want to read the books to you. And then if we want to, well, you know how I am. If I get thrown off or if I get another thought, I will step out of the book and park on the side and have a conversation about it. So with that said, I am going to turn into an avatar, put my reading glasses on, and get started. I hope you guys have a really good day. If you are just getting here, thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in. And just thank you for being on my channel. I appreciate it. You could be anywhere else in the world, but you're here with me. Thank you. All right, let's get started, y'all. Okay, so we are going to start with his first quote. You are here to enable the divine purpose of the universe to unfold. That is how important you are. We are going to skip past the author's preface and we are going to start with the introduction to the book. The origin of this book. I have little use for the past and rarely think about it. However, I would briefly like to tell you how I came to be a spiritual teacher and how this book came into existence. Until my 30th year, I lived in a state of almost continuous anxiety interspersed with periods of suicidal depression. It feels now as if I am talking about some past lifetime or somebody else's life. One night, not long after my 29th birthday, I woke up in the early hours with a feeling of absolute dread. I had woken up with such a feeling many times before, but this time it was more intense than it had ever been. The silence of the night, the vague outlines of the furniture in the dark room, the distant noise of a passing train. Everything felt so alien, so hostile, and so utterly meaningless that it created in me a deep loathing of the world. The most loathsome thing of all, however, was my own existence. What was the point in continuing to live with this burden of misery? Why carry on with this continuous struggle? I could feel that a deep longing for annihilation, for non existence, was now becoming much stronger than the instinctive desire to continue to live. I cannot live with myself any longer. This was the thought that kept repeating itself in my mind. Then suddenly I became aware of what a peculiar thought it was. Am I one or two? If I cannot live with myself, there must be two of me, and I am the self that I cannot live with. Maybe, I thought, only one of them is real. I was so stunned by this strange realization that my mind stopped. I was fully conscious, but there were no more thoughts. Then I felt drawn into what seemed like a vortex of energy. It was a slow movement at first, and then accelerated. I was gripped by an intense fear, and my body started to shake. I heard the words, resist nothing, as if spoken inside my chest. I could feel myself being sucked into a void. It felt as if the void was inside myself rather than outside. Suddenly, There was no more fear, and I let myself fall into that void. I have no recollection of what happened after that. I was awakened by the chirping of a bird outside the window. I had never heard such a sound before. My eyes were still closed, and I saw the image of a precious diamond. Yes, if a diamond could make a sound, this is what it would be like. I opened my eyes. The first light of dawn was filtering through the curtains. Without any thought, I felt, I knew that there is infinitely more to light than we realize. That soft luminosity filtering through the curtains was love itself. Without any thought, oh wait, I'm sorry, y'all. I lost myself. Okay, here we go. Tears came into my eyes. I got up and walked around the room. I recognized the room, and yet I knew that I had never truly seen it before. Everything was fresh and pristine, as if it had just come into existence. I picked up my things, a pencil, an empty bottle, marveling at the beauty and aliveness of it all. That day, I walked around the city in utter amazement at the miracle of life on earth, as if I had just been born into this world. For the first 5 months, I lived in a state of uninterrupted, deep peace and bliss. After that, it diminished somewhat in intensity, or perhaps it just seemed to because it became my natural state. I could still function in the world, although I realized that nothing I ever did could possibly add anything to what I already had. I knew, of course, that something profoundly significant had happened to me, but I didn't understand it at all. It wasn't until several years later, after I had read spiritual texts and spent time with spiritual teachers, that I realized that what everybody was looking for had already happened to me. I understood that the intense pressure of suffering that night must have forced my consciousness to withdraw from its identification with the unhappy and deeply fearful self, which is ultimately a fiction of the mind. This withdrawal must have been so complete that this false, suffering self immediately collapsed, just as if a plug had been pulled out of an inflatable toy. What was left then was my true nature as the ever present I am consciousness in its pure state prior to identification with form. Later, I also learned to go into that inner timeless and deathless realm that I had originally perceived as a void and remain fully conscious. I dwelt in states of such indescribable bliss and sacredness that even the original experience I just described pales in comparison. A time came when, for a while, I was left with nothing on the physical plane. I had no relationships, no job, no home, no socially defined identity. I spent almost 2 years sitting on park benches in a state of the most intense joy. But even the most beautiful experiences come and go. More fundamental, perhaps, than any experience is the undercurrent of peace that has never left me since then. Sometimes it is very strong, almost palpable, and others can feel it too. At other times, it is somewhere in the background, like a distant melody. Later, people would occasionally come up to me and say, I want what you have. Can you give it to me or show me how to get it? And I would say, you have it already. You just can't feel it because your mind is making too much noise. That answer later grew into the book that you are holding in your hands. Before I knew it, I had an external identity again. I had become a spiritual teacher. The truth that is within you. This book represents the essence of my work as far as it can be conveyed in words. with individuals and small groups of spiritual seekers during the past 10 years in Europe and in North America. In deep love and appreciation, I would like to thank those exceptional people for their courage, their willingness to embrace inner change, their challenging questions, and their readiness to listen. This book would not have come into existence without them. They belong to what is as yet a small but fortunately growing minority of spiritual pioneers, people who are reaching a point where they become capable of breaking out of inherited collective mind patterns that have kept humans in bondage to suffering for eons. I trust that this book will find its way to those who are ready for such radical inner transformation and so act as a catalyst for it. I also hope that it will reach many others who will find its content worthy of consideration, although they may not be ready to fully live or practice it. It is possible that at a later time, the seed that was sown when reading this book will merge with the seed of enlightenment that each human being carries within, and suddenly that seed will sprout and come alive within them. Okay, I'm gonna pause right here and mark where I'm at. I think for me personally, I'm somewhere in between where he says, I trust that this book will find its way to those who are ready. I do believe that I am ready. I also believe that the second part, I also hope that it will reach many others who finds this content worthy of consideration. I'm in between both of those. And I'm also in the space where I wasn't fully awakened when this book was published or when it was a big hit with the world initially during the Oprah Winfrey book club study phase of life. I wasn't aware. I wasn't awake at that time. So I am very thankful that books do exist and that we have them for reference and that I now, hopefully, even if it's one person or two people or in the future more, will be able to help spread the knowledge and the awareness and the awakening within these pages with more people like me who are ready for their spiritual. Um, I don't say awakening. I think I am spiritually woken. I feel like this is my spiritual walk, my spiritual journey back into the book. The book in its present form originated often spontaneously in response to questions asked by individuals in seminars, meditation classes, and private counseling sessions. And so I have kept the question and answer format. I learned and received as much in those classes and sessions as the questioners. Some of the questions and answers I wrote down almost verbatim. Others are generic, which is to say, I combined certain types of questions that were frequently asked into one and extracted the essence from different answers to form one generic answer. Sometimes, in the process of writing, an entirely new answer came that was more profound or insightful than anything I had ever uttered. Some additional questions were asked by the editor so as to provide further clarification of certain points. You will find that from the first to the last page, the dialogues continuously alternate between two different levels. On one level, I draw your attention to what is false in you. I speak of the nature of human unconsciousness and dysfunction, as well as its most common behavioral manifestations, from conflict in relationships to warfare between tribes or nations. Such knowledge is vital, for unless you learn to recognize the false as not you, there cannot there can be no lasting transformation. And you would always end up being drawn back into illusion and into some form of pain. On this level, I also show you how not to make that which is false in you into a self and into a personal problem, for that is how the false perpetuates itself. On another level, I speak of a profound transformation of human consciousness, not as a distant future possibility, but available now. No matter who or where you are shown how to free yourself from enslavement to the mind. Enter into this enlightened state of consciousness and sustain it in everyday life. On this level of the book, the words are not always concerned with information, but often designed to draw you into this new consciousness as you read. Again and again, I endeavor to take you with me into that timeless state of intense conscious presence in the now, so as to give you a taste of enlightenment. Until you are able to experience what I speak of, you may find those passages somewhat repetitive. As soon as you do, however, I believe you will realize that they contain a great deal of spiritual power, and they may become for you the most rewarding parts of the book. Moreover, since every person carries the seed of enlightenment within, I often address myself to the knower in you who dwells behind the thinker, the deeper self that immediately recognizes spiritual truth, resonates with it, and gains strength from it. The pause symbol after certain passages is a suggestion that you may want to stop reading for a moment, become still, and feel and experience the truth of what has been said. There may be other places in the text where you will do this naturally and spontaneously. As you begin reading the book, the meaning of certain words such as being or presence may not be entirely clear to you at first. Just read on. Questions or objections may occasionally come into your mind as you read. They will probably be answered later in the book, or they may turn out to be irrelevant as you go more deeply into the teaching and into yourself. Don't read with the mind only. Watch out for any feeling response. As you read, and a sense of recognition from deep within. I cannot tell you any spiritual truth that deep within that you don't already know. All I can do is remind you of what you have forgotten. Living knowledge, ancient and yet ever new, is then activated and released from within every cell of your body. The mind always wants to categorize and compare. This book will work better for you if you do not attempt to compare its terminology with that of other teachings. Otherwise, you will probably become confused. I use words such as mind, happiness, and consciousness in ways that do not necessarily correlate with other teachings. Don't get attached to any words. They are only stepping stones to be left behind as quickly as possible. When I occasionally quote the words of Jesus or the Buddha from A Course in Miracles or from other teachings, I do so not in order to compare, but to draw your attention to the fact that in essence, there is and always has been only one spiritual teaching. Although it comes in many forms, some of these forms, such as the ancient religions, have become so overlaid with extraneous matter that their spiritual essence has become almost completely obscured by it. To a large extent, therefore, their deeper meaning is no longer recognized and their transformative power lost. When I quote from the ancient religions or other teachings, It is to reveal their deeper meaning and thereby restore their transformative power, particularly for those readers who are followers of these religions or teachings. I say to them, there is no need to go elsewhere for the truth. Let me show you how to go more deeply into what you already have. Mostly, however, I have endeavored to use terminology that is as neutral as possible in order to reach a wide range of people. This book can be seen as a restatement for our time of that one timeless spiritual teaching, the essence of all religions. It is not derived from external sources, but from the one true source within. So it contains no theory or speculation. I speak from inner experience, and if at times I speak forcefully, it is to cut through heavy layers of mental resistance and to reach that place within you where you already know, just as I know, and where the truth is recognized when it is heard. There is then a feeling of exaltation and heightened aliveness as something within you says, yes, I know this is true. All right, that is the end of our introduction to the power of now. We are moving into chapter 1. You are not your mind. The greatest obstacle to enlightenment. Enlightenment. What is that? A beggar had been sitting by the side of a road for over 30 years. One day a stranger walked by. Spare some change, mumbled the beggar, mechanically holding out his old baseball cap. I have nothing to give you, said the stranger. Then he asked, what's that you are sitting on? Nothing, replied the beggar. Just an old box. I have been sitting on it for as long as I can remember. Ever looked inside? Asked the stranger. No, said the beggar. What's the point? There's nothing in there. Have a look inside, insisted the stranger. The beggar managed to pry open the lid. With astonishment, disbelief, and elation, he saw that the box was filled with gold. I am that stranger who has nothing to give you and who is telling you to look inside. Not inside any box, as in the parable, but somewhere even closer, inside yourself. I am not a beggar, I can hear you say. Those who have not found their true wealth, which is the radiant joy of being and the deep, unshakable peace that comes with it, are beggars, even if they have great material wealth. They are looking outside for scraps of pleasure or fulfillment, for validation, security, or love, while they have a treasure within that not only includes all those things, but is infinitely greater than anything the world can offer. The word enlightenment conjures up the idea of some superhuman accomplishment, and the ego likes to keep it that way. But it is simply your natural state of felt oneness with being. It is a state of connectedness with something immeasurable and indestructible, something that almost paradoxically is essentially you, and yet is much greater than you. It is finding your true nature beyond name and form. The inability to feel this connectedness gives rise to the illusion of separation from yourself and from the world around you. You then perceive yourself consciously or unconsciously, as an isolated fragment, fear arises and conflict within and without becomes the norm. I love Buddha's simple definition of enlightenment as the end of suffering. There is nothing superhuman in that, is there? Of course, as a definition, it is incomplete. It only tells you what enlightenment is not, no suffering. But what's left when there is no more suffering? The Buddha is silent on that. And his silence implies that you have to find out for yourself. He uses a negative definition so that the mind cannot make it into something to believe in or into a superhuman accomplishment, a goal that is impossible for you to attain. Despite this precaution, the majority of Buddhists still believe that enlightenment is for the Buddha, not for them, at least not in this lifetime. You used the word being. Can you explain what you mean by that? Being is the eternal, ever present, one life beyond the myriad forms of life that are subject to birth and death. However, being is not only beyond, but also deep within every form as its innermost invisible and indestructible essence. This means that it is accessible to you now as your own deepest self, your true nature. But don't seek to grasp it with your mind. Don't try to understand it. You can know it only when the mind is still, when you are present, when your attention is fully and intensely in the now. Being can be felt, but it can never be understood mentally. To regain awareness of being and to abide in that state of feeling realization is enlightenment. When you say being, are you talking about God? If you are, then why don't you say it? The word God has become empty of meaning through thousands of years of misuse. I use it sometimes, but I do so sparingly. By misuse, I mean that people who have never even glimpsed the realm of the sacred, the infinite vastness behind that word, use it with great conviction, as if they knew what they are talking about, or they argue against it as if they knew what it is they are denying. This misuse gives rise to absurd beliefs, assertions, and egoic delusions, such as my or our God is the only true God and your God is false, or Nietzsche's famous statement, God is dead. The word God has become a closed concept. The moment the word is uttered, a mental image is created, no longer, perhaps, of an old man with a white beard, but still a mental representation of someone or something outside you. And yes, almost inevitably, a male someone or something. Neither God nor being nor any other word can define or explain the ineffable reality behind the word. So the only important question is whether the word is a help or a hindrance in enabling you to experience that toward which it points. Does it point beyond itself to that transcendental reality, or does it lend itself too easily to becoming no more than an idea in your head that you believe in, a mental idol? The word being explains nothing, but nor does God. Being, however, has the advantage that it is an open concept. It does not reduce the infinite invisible to a finite entity. It is impossible to form a mental image of it. Nobody can claim exclusive possession of being. It is your very essence, and it is immediately accessible to you as the feeling of your own presence, the realization I am that is prior to I am this or I am that. So it is only a small step from the word being to the experience of being. What is the greatest obstacle to experiencing this reality? Identification with your mind, which causes thought to become compulsive. Not to be able to stop thinking is a dreadful affliction, but we don't realize this because almost everybody is suffering from it, so it is considered normal. This incessant mental noise prevents you from finding that realm of inner stillness that is inseparable from being. It also creates a false mind made self that casts a shadow of fear and suffering. We will look at all that in more detail later. The philosopher Descartes believed that he had found the most fundamental truth when he made his famous statement, I think, therefore I am. He had, in fact, given expression to the most basic error, to equate thinking with being and identity with thinking. The compulsive thinker, which means almost everyone, lives in a state of apparent separateness in an insanely complex world of continuous problems and conflict, a world that reflects the ever increasing fragmentation of the mind. Enlightenment is a state of wholeness, of being at one, and therefore at peace, at one with life in its manifested aspect, the world, as well as with your deepest self and life unmanifested, at one with being. Enlightenment is not only the end of suffering and of continuous conflict within and without, but also the end of the dreadful enslavement to incessant thinking. What an incredible liberation this is. Identification with your mind creates an opaque screen of concepts, labels, images, words, judgments, and definitions that blocks all true relationship. It comes between you and yourself, between you and your fellow man and woman, between you and nature, between you and God. It is this screen of thought that creates the illusion of separateness, the illusion that there is you and a totally separate other. You then forget the essential fact that underneath the level of physical appearances and separate forms, you are one with all that is. By forget, I mean that you can no longer feel this oneness as self evident reality. You may believe it to be true, but you no longer know it to be true. A belief may be comforting. Only through your own experience, however, does it become liberating. Thinking has become a disease. Disease happens when things get out of balance. For example, there is nothing wrong with cells dividing and multiplying in the body, but when this process continues in disregard of the total organism, cells proliferate and we have dis-ease. The mind is a superb instrument if used rightly. Used wrongly, however, becomes very destructive. To put it very accurately, it is not so much that you use your mind wrongly. You usually don't use it at all. It uses you. This is the disease. You believe that you are your mind. This is the delusion. The instrument has taken you over. Okay, y'all, I'm going to pause right here and tell y'all what I think. So, like, I always try to put things in small, digestible bites for myself to help me understand what I'm reading or learning at the moment. And what this sounds like to me is in our human form, our mind is like a robot. And in our human form, we can let the robot control us. It can control our humanness, our form, or we, our being, get to control our mind. Back into the book. I don't quite agree. It is true that I do a lot of aimless thinking, like most people, but I can still choose to use my mind to get and accomplish things. And I do that all the time. Just because you can solve a crossword puzzle or build an atom bomb doesn't mean that you use your mind. Just as dogs have love to chew bones, the mind loves to get its teeth into problems. That's why it does crossword puzzles and builds atom bombs. You have no interest in either. Let me ask you this. Can you be free of your mind whenever you want to? Have you found the off button? You mean stop thinking altogether? No, I can't, except maybe for a moment or two. If this is you, then the mind is using you. You are unconsciously identified with it. So you don't even know that you are its slave. It's almost as if you were possessed without knowing it. And so you take the possessing entity to be yourself. The beginning of freedom is the realization that you are not the possessing entity, the thinker. Knowing this enables you to observe the entity. The moment you start watching the thinker, a higher level of consciousness becomes activated. You then begin to realize there is a vast realm of intelligence beyond thought. That thought is only a tiny aspect of that intelligence. You also realize that all the things that truly matter, beauty, love, creativity, joy, inner peace, arise from beyond the mind. And you begin to awaken. Freeing yourself from your mind. What exactly do you mean by watching the thinker? When someone goes to the doctor and says, I hear a voice in my head, he or she will most likely be sent to a psychiatrist. The fact is that, in a very similar way, virtually everyone hears a voice or several voices in their head all the time. The involuntary thought processes that you don't realize you have the power to stop. continuous monologues or dialogues. You have probably come across mad people in the street incessantly talking or muttering to themselves. Well, that's not much different from what you and all other normal people do, except that you don't do it out loud. The voice comments, speculates, judges, compares, complains, likes, dislikes, and so on. The voice isn't necessarily relevant to the situation you find yourself in at the time. It may be reviving the recent or distant past, or rehearsing or imagining possible future situations. Here, it often imagines things going wrong and negative outcomes. This is called worry. Sometimes this soundtrack is accompanied by visual images or mental movies. Even if the voice is relevant to the situation at hand, it will interpret it in terms of the past. This is because the voice belongs to your conditioned mind, which is the result of all your past history as well as of the collective cultural mindset you inherited. So you see and judge the present through the eyes of the past and get a totally distorted view of it. It is not uncommon for the voice to be a person's own worst enemy. Many people live with a tormentor in their head that continuously attacks and punishes them and drains them of vital energy. It is the cause of untold misery and unhappiness, as well as disease. Good morning, Renee. Hey, sunshine. How have you been? I miss you. I do. It's been a long time. Thank you for being here on my random pop up day. We are in the midst of, let me see, we are actually in the middle of, because I got a long way to go. Chapter one. Yep. We're in the middle of chapter one. You are not your mind, from the book of The Power of Now. The good news is that you can free yourself from your mind. This is the only true liberation. You can take the first step right now. Start listening to the voice in your head as often as you can. Pay particular attention to any repetitive thought patterns, those old gramophone records that have been playing in your head perhaps for many years. This is what I mean by watching the thinker, which is another way of saying listen to the voice in your head. Be there as the witnessing presence. When you listen to that voice, listen to it impartially. That is to say, do not judge. Do not judge or condemn what you hear. For doing so would mean that the same voice has come in again through the back door. You'll soon realize there is the voice, and here I am, listening to it, watching it. This I am realization, this sense of your own presence is not a thought. It arises from beyond the mind. I am very, very good, and Renee. My new job is very challenging. And being mindful and learning more about mindfulness has absolutely been one of the greatest things I've ever done for myself and for others. I've been learning a lot about myself. I've been learning a lot about humanity and being, especially with this new job, and especially as having my son matriculate through his last year of high school without my daughter being in the house. It has been a very rewarding and growing experience. Yeah, that's how I'm doing, I guess. All right, back into the book. So when you listen to a thought, you are aware not only of the thought, but also of yourself as the witness of the thought. A new dimension of consciousness has come in. As you listen to the thought, you feel a conscious presence, your deeper self, behind or underneath the thought, as it were. The thought then loses its power over you and quickly subsides because you are no longer energizing the mind through identification with it. This is the beginning of the end of involuntary and compulsive thinking. When a thought subsides, you experience a discontinuity in the mental stream, a gap of no mind. At first, the gaps will be short, a few seconds perhaps, but gradually they will become longer. When these gaps occur, you feel a certain stillness and peace inside you. This is the beginning of your natural state of felt oneness with being, which is usually obscured by the mind. With practice, the sense of stillness and peace will deepen. In fact, there is no end to its depth. You will also feel a subtle emanation of joy arising from deep within, the joy of being. It is not a trance like state, not at all. There is no loss of consciousness here. The opposite is the case. If the price of peace were a lowering of your consciousness and the price of stillness a lack of vitality and alertness, then they would not be worth having. In this state of interconnectedness, you are much more alert, more awake than in the mind identified state. You are fully present. It also raises the vibrational frequency of the energy field that gives life to the physical body. I'm going to pause right here before I read the last paragraph, before this next pause. We are all thoughts. We are all consciousness, living, breathing, but we are all thoughts. And our thoughts create new conscious beings. The universe makes sure it replicates itself. That's what it does. And in our physical presence, some of us hope to be more than just physical beings in a body. Some of us hope to be aware and to be conscious of what is happening to us and around us and within us so that we can take our consciousness out of being humans into the next realm, back into the book. I have no idea if any of that made sense to you guys, but yeah, it is what it is. As you go more deeply into this realm of no mind, as it is sometimes called in the East, you realize the state of pure consciousness. In that state, you feel your own presence with such intensity and such joy that all thinking, all emotions, your physical body, as well as the whole external world, become relatively insignificant in comparison to it. And yet, this is not a selfish, but a selfless state. It takes you beyond what you previously thought of as yourself. That presence is essentially you, and at the same time, inconceivably greater than you. What I am trying to convey here may sound paradoxical or even contradictory, but there is no other way that I can express it. Instead of watching the thinker, you can also create a gap in the mind stream simply by directing the focus of your attention into the now. Just because intensely conscious of, I'm sorry, just become intensely conscious of the present moment. This is a deeply satisfying thing to do. In this way, you draw consciousness away from mind activity and create a gap of no mind in which you are highly alert and aware, but not thinking. This is the essence of meditation. And I'm going to pause right there because it sounds really strange to not think. But once you start being aware and removing your humanness from situations and even from your present space and are just able to be, you will find that there are no thoughts, that you are connecting with the universe, that you are connecting to a higher level. You are connecting to a higher being, if that makes sense. In your everyday life, you can practice this by taking any routine activity that normally is only a means to an end and giving it your fullest attention so that it becomes an end in itself. For example, every time you walk up and down the stairs in your house or place of work, pay close attention to every step, every movement, even your breathing. I'm gonna put a pin in that. Your breathing controls your thoughts. I'm gonna say that again. Your breathing controls your thoughts. When your mind is racing, if you stop and focus on your breath, and if you are able to take control of your breathing and take deep inhales and exhale, your thoughts will slow down. Your mind will stop racing. If you are not able to take control of your breathing, the thoughts will continue to race through your mind. Be totally present, or when you wash your hands, pay attention to all the sense perceptions associated with the activity, the sound and feel of the water, the movement of your hands, the scent of the soap, and so on. Or when you get into your car after you close the door, pause for a few seconds and observe the flow of your breath. Become aware of a silent but powerful sense of presence. There is one certain criterion by which you can measure your success in this practice: the degree of peace that you feel within. Take a deep breath. So, the single most vital step on your journey toward enlightenment is this: learn to disidentify from your mind. Every time you create a gap in the stream of mind, the light of your consciousness grows stronger. One day you may catch yourself smiling at the voice in your head as you would smile at the antics of a child. This means that you no longer take the content of your mind all that seriously, as your sense of self does not depend on it. Enlightenment, rising above thought. Isn't thinking essential in order to survive in this world? Your mind is an instrument, a tool. It is there to be used for a specific task. And when the task is completed, you lay it down. As it is, I would say about 80 to 90% of most people's thinking is not only repetitive and useless, but because of its dysfunctional and often negative nature, much of it is also harmful. Observe your mind, and you will find this to be true. It causes a serious leakage of vital energy. This kind of compulsive thinking is actually an addiction. What characterizes an addiction? Quite simply this: you no longer feel that you have the choice to stop. It seems stronger than you. It also gives you a false sense of pleasure, pleasure that invariably turns into pain. Why should we be addicted to thinking? Because you are identified with it, which means that you derive your sense of self from the content and activity of your mind. Because you believe that you would cease to be if you stopped thinking. As you grow up, you form a mental image of who you are based on your personal and cultural conditioning. We may call this phantom self the ego. It consists of mind activity and can only be kept going through constant thinking. The term ego means different things to different people, but when I use it here, it means a false self created by unconscious identification with the mind. To the ego, the present moment hardly exists. Only past and future are considered important. This total reversal of the truth accounts for the fact that in the ego mode, the mind is so dysfunctional. It is always concerned with keeping the past alive because without it, who are you? It constantly projects itself into the future to ensure its continued survival and to seek some kind of release or fulfillment there. It says, one day when this, that, or the other happens, I am going to be okay, happy, and at peace. Even when the ego seems to be concerned with the present, it is not the present that it sees. It misperceives it completely because it looks at it through the eyes of the past. Or it reduces the present to a means to an end that always lies in the mind projected future. Observe your mind and you'll see that this is how it works. The present moment holds the key to liberation, but you cannot find the present moment as long as you are your mind. I don't want to lose my ability to analyze and discriminate. I wouldn't mind learning to think more clearly in a more focused way, but I don't want to lose my mind. The gift of thought is the most precious thing we have. Without it, we would just be another species of animal. The predominance of mind is no more than a stage in the evolution of consciousness. We need to go on to the next stage now as a matter of urgency. Otherwise, we will be destroyed by the mind, which has grown into a monster. I will talk about this in more detail later. Thinking and consciousness are not are not synonymous. Thinking is only a small aspect of consciousness. Thought cannot exist without consciousness, but consciousness does not need thought. Enlightenment means rising above thought, not falling back to a level below thought, the level of an animal or a plant. In the enlightened state, you still use your thinking mind when needed, but in a much more focused an effective way than before. You use it mostly for practical purposes, but you are free of the involuntary internal dialogue, and there is inner stillness. When you do use your mind, and particularly when a creative solution is needed, you oscillate every few minutes or so between thought and stillness, between mind and no mind. No mind is consciousness without thought. Only in that way is it possible to think creatively, because only in that way does thought have any real power. Thought alone, when it is no longer connected with the much vaster realm of consciousness, quickly becomes barren, insane, and destructive. The mind is essentially a survival machine, attack and defense against other minds, gathering, storing, and analyzing information. This is what it is good at, but it is not at all creative. All true artists, whether they know it or not, create from a place of no mind, from inner stillness. The mind then gives form to the creative impulse or insight. Even the great scientists have reported that their creative breakthroughs came at a time of mental quietude. The surprising result of a nationwide inquiry among America's most eminent mathematicians, including Einstein, to find out their working methods was that thinking plays only a subordinate part in the brief, decisive phase of the creative act itself. So I would say that the simple reason why the majority of scientists are not creative is not because they don't know how to think, but because they don't know how to stop thinking. Okay, I'm gonna pause right there because I'm a pretty creative person, but I am able to oscillate between um I guess the education that I've received to be in the field or the profession that I'm in, as well as being able to unplug and be a creative and to think outside of the box. And what I think is happening to me now as I learn more about the spiritual realm and the higher beingness that is intriguing to me and has allowed me to have peace in the midst of so many storms in my life is that I've learned unintentionally, now intentionally, to stop thinking and to just be present and to just be. And the more that I learn about this work, the more I'm able to consciously do that instead of doing it unconsciously. I think I've done it unconsciously for a long time in my adulthood, but now that I'm focused on it and I'm learning about it, I'm able to oscillate between those two spaces even more so now than ever before in my life. It wasn't through the mind, through thinking, that the miracle that is life on earth or your body was created and is being sustained. There is clearly an intelligence at work that is far greater than the mind. How can a single human cell measuring 1/1000th of an inch in diameter contain instructions within its DNA that would fill 1,000 books of 600 pages each? The more we learn about the workings of the body, the more we realize just how vast is the intelligence at work within it and how little we know. When the mind reconnects with that, it becomes a most wonderful tool. It then serves something greater than itself. And Renee says, I'm still here listening, organized. This is a listening day. That's all. I'm listening to myself. I am learning. So this is why I saved the book to read with you guys because I was gonna start reading it yesterday by myself, and I wanted to share it today because I'm also practicing learning to be like the sage on the stage or the presenter of the information, as well as being the the, I guess, student. I'm practicing with you guys and Renee, I'm practicing being, I think, like a duality. I am learning with you, but I am also presenting this information to you. I'm trying to, I think multitasking is not a good word. I used to say that about myself all the time. I'm a really good multitasker. Technically, you can only focus on one thing at a time. You can do multiple things, but you might not be doing all of those multiple things well, right? But I am practicing, intentionally practicing being a giver of knowledge and a recipient of knowledge at the same time. So we'll see how this goes. So while you're washing your collard greens, I'm over here doing multiple things too. And Renee, thank you. Emotion, the body's reaction to your mind. What about emotions? I get caught up in my emotions more than I do in my mind. Before I start reading, I'm just thinking out loud. Your emotions are triggered by your mind. I think this is what I think before I read and teach us, including me, about it. I feel like your emotions are triggered by your mind and by the space of whatever lived experiences and or traumatic experiences you have inside of you. That is where your emotions come from. Okay, just wanted to let you know I was still here. Thank you. I appreciate you, boo. All right. Mind, and the way I use the word, is not just thought. It includes your emotions as well as all unconscious mental, emotional, reactive patterns. Emotion arises at the place where mind and body meet. It is the body's reaction to your mind, or you might say, a reflection of your mind in the body. I think that's what I just said, y'all. I think that's what I just said. You hear what I just said? I think I ain't supposed to be thinking. Get it together, girl. Get it together. For example, an attack thought or a hostile thought will create a buildup of energy in the body that we call anger. The body is getting ready to fight. The thought that you are being threatened physically or psychologically causes the body to contract. And this is the physical side of what we call fear. Research has shown that strong emotions even cause changes in the biochemistry of the body. These biochemical changes represent the physical or mental aspect of the emotion. Of course, you are not usually conscious of all your thought patterns, and it is often only through watching your emotions that you can bring them into awareness. The more you are identified with your thinking, your likes and dislikes, judgments and interpretations, which is to say, the less present you are as the watching consciousness, the stronger the emotional energy charge will be, whether you are aware of it or not. If you cannot feel your emotions, if you are cut off from them, you will eventually experience them on a purely physical level as a physical problem or symptom. A great deal has been written about this in recent years, so we don't need to go into it here. A strong unconscious emotional pattern may even manifest as an external event that appears to just happen to you. For example, I have observed that people who carry a lot of anger inside without being aware of it and without expressing it are more likely to be attacked verbally or even physically by other angry people, and often for no apparent reason. They have a strong emanation of anger that certain people pick up subliminally, and that triggers their own latent anger. If you have difficulty feeling your emotions, start by focusing attention on the inner energy field of your body. Feel the body from within. This will also put you in touch with your emotions. We will explore this in more detail later. You say that an emotion is the mind's reflection of the body, but sometimes there is a conflict between the two. The mind says no, while the emotion says yes, or the other way around. If you really want to know your mind, the body will always give you a truthful reflection. So look at the emotion, or rather, feel it in your body. If there is no apparent conflict between them, the thought will be the lie, the emotion will be the truth. Not the ultimate truth of who you are, but the relative truth of your state of mind at the time. Conflict between surface thoughts and unconscious mental processes is certainly common. You may not yet be able to bring your unconscious mind activity into awareness as thoughts, but it will always be reflected in the body as an emotion. And if this, you can become aware. To watch an emotion in this way is basically the same as listening to or watching a thought, which is described earlier. The only difference is that while a thought is in your head, an emotion has a strong physical component, and so is primarily felt in the body. You can then allow the emotion to be there without being controlled by it. You no longer are the emotion. You are the watcher, the observing presence. If you practice this, all that is unconscious in you will be brought into the light of consciousness. So, observing our emotions is as important as observing our thoughts. Yes. Make it a habit to ask yourself, what's going on inside me at this moment? That question will point you in the right direction. But don't analyze, just watch. Focus your attention within. Feel the energy of the emotion. If there is no emotion present, take your attention more deeply into the inner energy field of your body. It is the doorway into being. Good morning, Foxy and family. Happy Sunday, sunshine. Good morning, good morning, and good morning. An emotion usually represents an amplified and energized thought pattern. And because of its often overpowering energetic charge, it is not easily initially to stay present enough to be able to watch it. It wants to take you over, and it usually succeeds unless there is enough presence in you. If you are pulled into unconscious identification with the emotion through lack of presence, which is normal, the emotion temporarily becomes you. Often a vicious circle builds up between your thinking and the emotion. They feed each other. Okay, I got to put a pause right here, y'all. Okay, so let me tell y'all this story. The people at my new job, they like to talk a lot. And it has been the most interesting thing to sit and be in the presence of people who talk in circles. Literally, they have meetings and they talk about the things that they think are real, and then they have another meeting about that. They don't come up with, like, things or solutions or anything. I call it circular conversation, and they love these circular conversations, and the circular conversations drive me crazy. I didn't know so many grown-ups just like to sit and listen to themselves talk. I am the complete opposite. OMG. If I'm having a meeting, I really am just looking for the actions items that I'm supposed to do. Tell me what you need me to do so I can get it done. Literally, that's why I show up at meetings. What we doing, what we need to get done, boom, I'm on it. Mm-mm, mm-mm. That's not what happens with this place I'm at. They meet and they talk and they talk and they talk about the things that they talked about, and then they talk about those things that they talked about again and again and again. And then they all sit around and talk about their thinking, and it turns into a circular conversation. And as the new person, I just literally sit in amazement that this is normal for them to just sit around and talk about nothing. Okay, let me get back into the book. So yeah, this, he says, often a vicious circle builds up between your thinking and the emotions. These are the people that I work with. Somewhere between their thoughts and their emotions about the things that they think and like they just talk. Circular conversations continue. The thought pattern creates a magnified reflection of itself in the form of an emotion, and the vibrational frequency of the emotion keeps feeding the original thought pattern. By dwelling mentally on the situation, event, or person that is the perceived cause of the emotion, the thought feeds energy to the emotion, which in turn energizes the thought pattern, and so on. This is nothing but my circular people talking to themselves. This is it. This is it personified. I gotta figure out how to wrap this little wait, I gotta put a sticky note right here, y'all. Give me a second. I gotta find my sticky notes. Where they at? Imma find a way to wrap this into one of my staff meetings. Circular thinking instead of just being. I gotta work with my staff on that. Alright, back into the book. Basically, all emotions are modifications of one primordial, undifferentiated emotion that has its origin in the loss of awareness of who you are beyond name and form. Because of its undifferentiated nature, it is hard to find a name that precisely describes this emotion. Fear comes close, but apart from a continuous sense of threat, it also includes a deep sense of abandonment and incompleteness. It may be best to use a term that is as undifferentiated as that basic emotion and simply call it pain. I would agree. I believe a lot of the meetings that I am sitting in, the biggest central, and I never thought about it until now, you guys. I think their biggest central message is centered around pain, either their lived pain that is deflected and reflected onto the students that we service, or the parents' pain that is reflected. And I'm gonna tell y'all this too. One thing about education, I think in general, is because of the lived experience of a worldwide pandemic that we've all lived through. A lot of parents, a lot of people who are in the business of loving and helping children reflect their anxiety and fear about these last 2.5 to 3 years of some type of loss, whether it is educational loss, whether it is social emotional loss, and or financial loss. A lot of human beings are deflecting that sense of loss onto their children right now. And it is permeating our school spaces. It is permeating an already broken K 12 system. So much so that parents are looking to fill and close gaps that don't exist because we all live through the same trauma, right? So if there is a gap in math, or let's say there's a gap in reading, that gap exists for mostly, generally, all students, right? Like a lot of students were not plugged into school for the last 2.5 to 3 years. So to try to close a void based on years of lost knowledge is a false sense of deflecting your sense of loss onto children. And I see so much damage and so many painful conversations that we are having to try to help restore this loss in children that doesn't really exist. You can't lose something that you never had, right? There's no math loss if I never got the knowledge in the first place. I might not be where I'm supposed to be based on years of study of peers my age, but that's thrown out the window because the last 2.5 to 3 years we've been living through this tragedy in the world. And it only happens about every 100 years if you know history, right? So when he says it may be best to use a term that is as undifferentiated as the basic emotion and simply call it pain, that resonated with me because a lot of the conversations and a lot of the circular conversations that I hear adults having about restoring children and filling in these gaps, it really is a sense of pain that the adults are inflicting on their children. And we're doing so much damage to these children by identifying them based on loss or need instead of meeting them where they are currently and helping them grow. One of the main tasks of the mind is to fight or remove that emotional pain, which is one of the reasons for its incessant activity. But all it can ever achieve is to cover it up temporarily. In fact, the harder the mind struggles to get rid of the pain, the greater the pain. The mind can never find the solution, nor can it afford to allow you to find the solution because it is itself an intrinsic part of the problem. Remember, I said earlier in this chapter, I correlate things that I read to help me understand it better to real life. And all I see is like a robot. The mind functions as a robot. And remember, like when robots really came on the scene and all humanity was scared of robots because robots were going to take over industries and robots were going to take over the world. And then humans were going to be secondary. And so we had a fear of robots, right? Like it was big when I was younger. But if your mind is the robot and you have no control over your thoughts, you've already let the robot take over. If you cannot control your thoughts and your thinking, if you are not able to just be without a thought controlling that space, that is a problem. You are not in touch with who you really are. You are allowing pain, excuse me, you are allowing pain and your past to control who you are in your present. And that's reflected into your future. Imagine a chief of police trying to find an arsonist when the arsonist is the chief of police. You will not be free of that pain until you cease to derive your sense of self from identification with the mind, which is to say, from ego. The mind is then toppled from its place of power and being reveals itself as your true nature. Yes, I know what you are going to ask. What about positive emotions such as love and joy? They are inseparable from your natural state of interconnectedness with being. Glimpses of love and joy, or brief moments of deep peace, are possible whenever a gap occurs in the stream of thought. For most people, such gaps happen rarely and only accidentally in moments when the mind is rendered speechless. Sometimes triggered by great beauty, extreme physical exertion, or even great danger. Suddenly, there is inner stillness. And within that stillness, there is a subtle but intense joy. There is love, there is peace. Usually, such moments are short lived as the mind quickly resumes its noise making activity that we call thinking. Love, joy, and peace cannot flourish until you have freed yourself from mind dominance. And I'm going to put a pin or pause right here because I have self identified as an overthinker. So much so, I think this summer I said I was an overthinker. But I will honestly say my new job makes me not be an overthinker. It is really weird how the universe does its thing, right? I've been self identifying as an overthinker until I was put into a space with so many overthinkers that I was forced to just be. Have you ever been forced to just be? When you are in a room with, I'll use it like a meeting room, and I'll pull in, and let's just say two parents who are overthinking about their child's education based on the past 2.5 to 3 years, right? The parents are overthinking. They're trying to be 5 steps ahead because, and I'll share this. One parent said it's either Harvard or the penitentiary for their child. Y'all, I couldn't think anything. I just had to be present because I found it very, I think a little bit disturbing that that is the id of that parent to think if I don't intervene on my child's behalf, who is a young child, I believe inherently, this is what the parent is stating. I believe inherently that my child will either go to Harvard or end up in the penitentiary. Y'all, I didn't have an option to think anything. I was forced into the unthinking zone. And some of these meetings that I've been attending this year have further allowed me to just be present, to hear outside of my own realm of understanding and knowledge what other people believe is, what they believe is true for them and their children. And it is a very interesting space to be in, very interesting space. And most of the time, because I'm not thinking, I don't have answers for these parents. I'm just present. And that's the greatest gift I can give them is my presence. But they are not what I would call emotions. They lie beyond the emotions on a much deeper level. So you need to become fully conscious of your emotions and be able to feel them before you can feel what lies beyond them. Emotion literally means disturbance. The word comes from the Latin a movere, meaning to disturb. Love, joy, and peace are deep states of being, or rather, three aspects of the state of interconnectedness with being. As such, they have no opposite. This is because they arise from beyond the mind. Emotions, on the other hand, being part of the dualistic mind, are subject to the law of the opposite. This simply means that you cannot have good without bad. So, in the enlightened, mind identified condition, what is sometimes wrongly called joy is the usually short lived pleasure side of the continuously alternating pain pleasure cycle. Pleasure is not always derived from something outside you, whereas joy arises from within. The very thing that gives you pleasure today will give you pain tomorrow, or it will leave you. So its absence will give you pain. And what is often referred to as love may be pleasurable and exciting for a while, but it is an addictive clinging, an extremely needy condition that can turn into its opposite at the flick of a switch. Many love relationships, after the initial euphoria has passed, actually oscillate between love and hate, attraction and attack. Real love doesn't make you suffer. How could it? It doesn't suddenly turn into hate, nor does real joy turn into pain. As I said, even before you are enlightened, before you have freed yourself from your mind, you may get glimpses of true joy, true love, or of a deep inner peace, but still vibrantly alive. These are aspects of your true nature, which is usually obscured by the mind. Even within a normal, addictive relationship, there can be moments when the presence of something more genuine, something incorruptible, can be felt. But they will only be glimpses, soon to be covered up again through mind interference. It may then seem that you had something very precious and lost it, or your mind may convince you that it was all an illusion anyway. The truth is that it wasn't an illusion, and you cannot lose it. It is part of your natural state, which can be obscured but can never be destroyed by the mind. Even when the sky is heavily overcast, the sun has not disappeared. It's still there on the other side of the cloud. The Buddha says that pain or suffering arises through desire or craving, and that to be free of pain, we need to cut the bonds of desire. All cravings are the mind seeking salvation or fulfillment in external things, and in the future as a substitute for the joy of being. As long as I am my mind, I am those cravings, those needs, wants, attachments, and aversions. And apart from them, there is no I except as a mere possibility, an unfulfilled potential, a seed that has not yet sprouted. In that state, even my desire to become free or enlightened is just another craving for fulfillment or completion in the future. So don't seek to become free of desire or achieve enlightenment. Become present. Be there as the observer of the mind. Instead of quoting the Buddha, be the Buddha. Be the awakened one, which is what the word Buddha means. Humans have been in the grip of pain for eons, ever since they fell from the state of grace, entered the realm of time and mind, and lost awareness of being. And he's speaking of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden when they woke and they were no longer just being. We have been fighting this since then and everything. At that point, they started to perceive themselves as meaningless fragments in an alien universe, unconnected to the source and to each other. And we have been trying to get back to being connected to the source instead of just being the source. We are the source. You are the source. I am the source. We are the source. Pain is inevitable as long as you are identified with your mind, which is to say, as long as you are unconscious, spiritually speaking. I am talking here primarily of emotional pain, which is also the main cause of physical pain and physical disease. Resentment, hatred, self pity, guilt, anger, depression, jealousy, and so on. Even the slightest irritation are all forms of pain. And every pleasure or emotional high contains within itself the seed of pain. It's inseparable opposite, which will manifest in time. Anybody who has ever taken drugs to get high will know that the high eventually turns into a low, that the pleasure turns into some form of pain. Many people also know from their own experience how easily and quickly an intimate relationship can turn from a source of pleasure to a source of pain. Seen from a higher perspective, both the negative and the positive polarities are faces of the same coin, are both part of the underlying pain that is inseparable from the mind identified egoic state of consciousness. There are two levels to your pain: the pain that you create now and the pain from the past that still lives on in your mind and body. Ceasing to create pain in the present and dissolving past pain. This is what I want to talk about now. Okay, so typically, you guys, we're gonna take a pause for a second. So typically, in the recent past, like the last 2 months was the last time I was live, I would only try to be live for like an hour. It's been an hour and 46, and I'm just now finishing chapter one. And I'm trying to remove the things that I want to do today or have on my schedule to do today. And I think I need to go ahead and at least start chapter two and see what that feels like. And I might finish it and I might not. I don't think I'm going to get into chapter three though, because it is a little lengthy. So I am going to stay here and I am going to get started with chapter two. And I hope you stay with me. And if not, I hope you tune in later and finish listening. Chapter two: Consciousness, the way out of pain. Create no more pain in the present. Nobody's life is entirely free of pain and sorrow. Isn't it a question of learning to live with them rather than trying to avoid them? The greater part of human pain is unnecessary. It is self created as long as the unobserved mind runs your life. The pain that you create now is always some form of non acceptance, some form of unconsciousness resistance to what is. On the level of thought, The resistance is some form of judgment. On the emotional level, it is some form of negativity. The intensity of the pain depends on the degree of resistance to the present moment. And this, in turn, depends on how strongly you are identified with your mind. The mind always seeks to deny the now and to escape from it. In other words, the more you are identified with your mind, the more you suffer. Or you may put it like this: the more you are able to honor and accept the now, the more you are free of pain, of suffering, and free of the egoic mind. Why does the mind habitually deny or resist the now? Because it cannot function and remain in control without time, which is past and future. So it perceives the timeless now as threatening. Time and mind are in fact inseparable. Imagine the earth devoid of human life, inhabited only by plants and animals. Would it still have a past and a future? Could we still speak of time in any meaningful way? The question, what time is it? Or what's the date today? If anybody were there to ask it, would be quite meaningless. The oak tree or the eagle would be bemused by such a question. What time? They would ask. Well, of course it's now. The time is now. What else is there? Yes, we need the mind as well as time to function in this world. But there comes a point where they take over our lives. And this is where dysfunction, pain, and sorrow set in. The mind, to ensure that it remains in control, seeks continuously to cover up the present moment with past and future. And so, as the vitality and infinite creative potential of being, which is inseparable from the now, becomes covered up by time, your true nature becomes obscured by the mind. An increasingly heavy burden of time has been accumulating in the human mind. All individuals are suffering under this burden, but they also keep adding to it every moment. Whenever they ignore or deny that precious moment or reduce it to a means of getting to some future moment, which only exists in the mind, never in actuality. Okay, y'all, I'm gonna pause right here because I said exits and then I realized it was exist. That is one strange thing about the English language. Two words can be written the exact same way and spelled exactly the same, but pronounced differently in the context of a sentence. Okay, that's it. That's all. Okay, that's it. But I think because of the S, I missed it because exits would just be EXITS and exists has the S, EXISTS. Mhm, mhm. The accumulation of time in the collective and individual human mind also holds a vast amount of residual pain from the past. If you no longer want to create pain for yourself and others, if you no longer want to add to the residue of past pain that still lives on in you, then don't create any more time, or at least no more than is necessary to deal with the practical aspects of your life. How do you stop creating time? Realize deeply that the present moment is all you ever have. Make the now, this moment, the primary focus of your life. Whereas before you dwelt in time and paid brief visits to the now, Have your dwelling place in the now and pay brief visits to past and future when required to deal with the practical aspects of your life situation. Always say yes to the present moment. What could be more futile, more insane than to create inner resistance to something that already is? What could be more insane than to oppose life itself, which is now and always now? Surrender to what is. Say yes to life and see how life suddenly starts working for you rather than against you. That is the state of being. Just be, y'all. The present moment is sometimes unacceptable, unpleasant, or awful. It is as it is. One of the things I say, I'm out of the book right now, y'all. One of the things I say when I find myself in moments like that, it is what it ain't. I have to stop thinking of what I want things to be and accept them for what they are. And that's where I came up with my saying. It is what it ain't. It ain't what I wanted it to be, but it is what it is. And so once I acknowledge that it is, and I remove my expectation and take it away what it ain't, I am able to just be. I think sometimes people think I'm being facetious when I say that, but I am learning for me, that's how I quantify my being present in the moment. It is what it ain't. I might have had an expectation. I might have brought my past into this situation or wanted to reflect onto the future instead of being present. And when I encountered that, it is what it ain't. It ain't what I thought, but it is what it is. Observe how the mind labels it and how this labeling process, this continuous sitting in judgment, creates pain and unhappiness. By watching the mechanics of the mind, you step out of its resistance patterns and you can then allow the present moment to be. This will give you a taste of the state of inner freedom from external conditions, the state of true inner peace. Then see what happens and take action if necessary or possible. Accept the act. Whatever the present moment contains, accept it as if you had chosen it. Always work with it, not against it. Make it your friend and ally, not your enemy. This will miraculously transform your whole life. I'm gonna share something with y'all that happened to me last week. So, for my new job, I had very rosy glasses on about my position, about the community that I was working in, and all of these wonderful things that I was going to be able to help them do, and this whole list, right? This past week, I knew the bubble was going to get burst. I just didn't know exactly when or how. I kind of saw some of the threads unraveling about my little bubble that I had created about my position. And this week, that bubble was burst. It was burst because I have I have seen that there is no distinction between um, staff members being staff members and their ability to and their I'll say it this way, staff members as staff members that include, like if I were to draw a Venn diagram, the overlapping relationships that they have with parents in my new space, right? And these overlapping relationships that staff members have with parents causes a lot of friction because there could be some things happening that the staff is aware of that the parents don't need to know about per se. But because staff members are so close with parents in this new space, they tell parents the business. And then that causes parents to want to know more, to inquire deeper, about things that they have no need to know about, right? And so I thought coming in, I would be the catalyst of transformation to help everybody see themselves and to grow. Girl, please. The universe was like, "Sit down and just watch, child, 'cause, you can't even do nothing yet until you figure out all of these convoluted relationships." And so that's kinda where I'm sorry, I just hit my mic. That's kinda where I have been dwelling over the weekend as I get ready to go back to work tomorrow. Like, how do I navigate a space where I don't really trust the staff right now because I feel like they tell parents everything, yet it is still my job to work with everybody, to work with the staff, to work with the parents, to work with the kids. Like, I have to now and when I was a classroom teacher, it was easy. I could just shut the world out and close my classroom door and deal with the kids. But now that I'm an administrator, I don't have that luxury. I am forced to still work in a space where I don't fully trust people now. And so this is new territory for me because when I don't trust people, I remove them from my life. I don't care if you are my relative. I don't care if you are blood related and or we've been friends for centuries. I can't say centuries. I ain't that old. Decades though, right? So either they remove me or I remove them and life goes on and we don't even talk about it anymore. I can't do that this time. And I think that's why I'm so into this spiritual awakening because I really want to be an effective leader. So much so that I help people think outside of themselves. When you are working with parents that are very high maintenance, staff that is very high maintenance, and sprinkle in a large dose of privilege, that's a tough ask, y'all. It is difficult space to navigate if you are new. Like, I'm new to all of this. So, me practicing being present is really, really, really my thing right now. I have to remove myself from all of the things that I see here and just be present because if not, I will be reactive to a lot of the things that I've been encountering. So, yeah, that's just my little story. Okay, back in the book. Past pain, dissolving the pain body. As long as you are unable to access the power of the now, every emotional pain that you experience leaves behind a residue of pain that lives on in you. It merges with the pain from the past, which was already there, and becomes lodged in your mind and body. This, of course, includes the pain you suffered as a child, caused by the unconsciousness of the world into which you were born. I'll share this story because that's what I do. Um, my brother is about 7 years older than me, and my brother's childhood was different than my childhood. So much so that whenever my brother feels offended by any perception of what he thinks that I am, past, present, or future, he lashes out at me verbally about his childhood, his upbringing, and he compares it to mine. And it is a very difficult space to continually have to live in with someone who likes to recycle past stories about themselves and their perception of you. Like, how do you function in that type of relationship? Which, for me, now that I am being present, feels abusive to a degree. Familial relationships with unresolved trauma can be abusive, not physically, it can be mentally, it can be reactionary. I also learned that for some reason, my family doesn't feel that they have the ability to say no to. And that is a weird space to live in with people that you love, that you lean on. right? That feel that you leaning on them is problematic, but they never tell you no. So it's a continual cycle of stop leaning on the family, but lean on the family because we want to help you. But when you lean on the family, it means you're not taking responsibility for your life, for your actions, right? It's just a really weird space to be in, to be present and to see. Like, I've never seen it before from my brother until recently because of the work that I've been doing on myself, that he told me a lot of stories that he's told me before. But this time when he brought up the pain past that he felt, I heard him clearly. And I also reflected on his past pain stories. He keeps telling the exact same story because that pain body is comfortable. And so, in my attempt to remove that pain body, it is going to drastically change the relationship that I have with my brother. It is just a strange place to be right now, but it is my reality. Okay, back into the book. This accumulated pain is a negative energy field that occupies your body and mind. If you look on, it's as an invisible entity in its own right. You are getting quite close to the truth. It's the emotional pain body. It has two modes of being, dormant and active. A pain body may be dormant 90% of the time. In a deeply unhappy person, though, it may be active up to 100% of the time. And I'll put a pause here and say it can also be triggered because what I also learned this go round with listening to his pain body speak to me is that his daughter, my niece, has the ability to trigger his pain body toward me. And he reflects her energy through him onto me. It is a really different and difficult space to navigate, but I'm here in it. I'll let y'all know how it goes. I just figured it out. It's only been this last week that like all of the pieces fell into place about my brother's pain body and my niece's ability to trigger his pain body. Some people live almost entirely through their pain body, while others may experience it only in certain situations, such as intimate relationships or situations linked with past loss or abandonment, physical or emotional hurt, and so on. Anything can trigger it, particularly if it resonates with a pain pattern from your past. When it is ready to awaken from its dormant stage, even a thought or an innocent remark by someone close to you can activate it. And this is literally, I gotta put a sticky right here, y'all. This is literally the behaviors that are happening with me, my niece, and my brother. My niece's pain body awakens my brother's pain bodies about his past, support growing up, our lived experiences. And then he reflects that pain body onto me because she's triggered him. Instead of her being able to have a conversation with me, she does this work through my brother. Whether it's conscious or unconscious, that I'm not sure of yet, but I'm clear that this is the cycle that is happening with the three of us. And so the best way for me to navigate this is to remove myself from it. Some pain bodies are obnoxious, but relatively harmless. For example, like a child who won't stop whining. Others are vicious and destructive monsters, true demons. Some are physically violent. Many are more emotionally violent. Some will attack people around you or close to you, while others may attack you, their host. Thoughts and feelings you have about your life then become deeply negative and self destructive. Illnesses and accidents are often created in this way. Some pain bodies drive their hosts. to suicide. When you thought you knew a person and then you are suddenly confronted with this alien, nasty creature for the first time, you are in for quite a shock. However, it's important to observe it in yourself than in someone else. Watch out for any sign of unhappiness in yourself in whatever form. It may be the awakening pain body. This can take the form of irritation, impatience, a somber mood, a desire to hurt, anger, rage, depression, a need to have some drama in your relationship, and so on. Catch it the moment it awakens from its dormant state. The pain body wants to survive, just like every other entity in existence. It can only survive if it gets you to unconsciously identify with it. It can then rise up, take you over, become you, and live through you. It needs to get its food through you. It will feed on any experience that resonates with its own kind of energy. Anything that creates further pain in whatever form, anger, destructiveness, hatred, grief, emotional drama, violence, and even illness. So the pain body, when it has taken you over, will create a situation in your life that reflects back its own energy frequency for it to feed on. Pain can only feed on pain. Pain cannot feed on joy. It finds it quite indigestible. Once the pain body has taken you over, you want more pain. I'm going to put a pin right here because before I started this job, I was on YouTube all the time. I was in a whole bunch of spaces on YouTube that were toxic AF. Toxic AF. I am very thankful that I am too busy to be in those toxic places. But one of the things that I reflect on as I'm reading this and as I've been doing the work to be present and to be and to just, you know, be present is that on YouTube and in life, people it's a common saying, hurt people. That is the pain body needing to feed on more pain. The pain body will find a reason to inflict pain on others. The pain body will excuse its behavior. It will excuse its behavior. It will seek like minded pain bodies, and they together will team up to feed on each other's pain. You see it all the time. It is mob mentality. It is cancel culture. It is the payback, the get back. You did this to me. You don't get to pick how I respond to you. All of that is a pain body seeking more pain to keep that energy relevant in the universe. When you identify that pain body, acknowledge it, y'all. Let it go. Let it go for you. Learn to be, learn to sit with it, learn to grow from it, learn to release it. You cannot change the past. You cannot change the past. You can be present and you can create a different future. Or you can keep recycling those terrible stories, those terrible thoughts, that pain body, and you can keep inflicting that. Because when you inflict pain on others, you first inflict it on yourself. You feel the pain again. And because you feel that pain again, you intentionally want others to feel pain as well. You become a victim or a perpetrator. You want to inflict pain. You want to suffer pain, or both. There isn't really much difference between the two. You are not conscious of this, of course, and will vehemently claim that you do not want pain. But look closely, and you will find that your thinking and behavior are designed to keep the pain going for yourself and others. If you were truly conscious of it, the pattern would dissolve. For to want more pain is insanity, and nobody is consciously insane. That is why it is important to stop thinking, learn to be, and being can start off uncomfortable. The pauses are intentional, but if you're being, it's just peaceful. There are no thoughts. You're just waiting. The pain body, which is the dark shadow cast by the ego, is actually afraid of the light of your consciousness. It is afraid of being found out. Its survival depends on your unconscious identification with it, as well as on your unconscious fear of facing the pain that lives in you. But if you don't face it, if you don't bring the light of your consciousness into the pain, you will be forced to relive it again and again. The pain body may seem to you like a dangerous monster that you cannot bear to look at, but I assure you that it is an insubstantial phantom that cannot prevail against the power of your presence. Some spiritual teachings state that all pain is ultimately an illusion, and this is true. The question is it true for you? A mere belief doesn't make it true. Do you want to experience pain for the rest of your life and keep saying that it is an illusion? Does that free you from the pain? What we are concerned with here is how you can realize this truth. That is, make it real in your own experience. So the pain body doesn't want you to observe it directly and see it for what it is. The moment you observe it, feel its energy feel within you, and take your attention into it, the identification is broken. A higher dimension of consciousness has come in. I call it presence. You are now the witness or the watcher of the pain. This means that it cannot use you anymore by pretending to be you, and it can no longer replenish itself through you. You have found your own innermost strength. You have accessed the power of now. What happens to the pain body when we become conscious enough to break our identification with it? Unconsciousness creates it, consciousness transmutes it into itself. St. Paul expressed this universal principle beautifully. Everything is shown up by being exposed to the light, and whatever is exposed to the light itself becomes light. Just as you cannot fight the darkness, you cannot fight the pain body. Trying to do so would create inner conflict and thus further pain. Watching it is enough. Watching it implies accepting it as part of what is Pain body consists of trapped life energy that has split off from your total energy field and has temporarily become autonomous through the unnatural process of mind identification. It has turned in on itself and become anti life, like an animal trying to devour its own tail. Why do you think our civilization has become so life destructive? But even the life destructive forces are still life energy. When you start to disidentify and become the watcher, the pain body will continue to operate for a while and will try to trick you into identifying with it again. Although you are no longer energizing it through your identification, it has a certain momentum, just like a spinning wheel that will keep turning for a while, even when it is no longer being propelled. At this stage, it may also create physical aches and pains in different parts of the body, but they won't last. Stay present, stay conscious, be the ever alert guardian of your inner space. You need to be present enough to be able to watch the pain body directly and feel its energy. It then cannot control your thinking. The moment your thinking is aligned with the energy field of the pain body, you are identified with it. And again, feeding it with your thoughts. For example, if anger is the predominant energy vibration of the pain body and you think angry thoughts, dwelling on what someone did to you or what you are going to do to him or her, then you have become unconscious and the pain body has become you. Where there is anger, there is always pain underneath. Or when a dark mood comes upon you and you start getting into a negative mind pattern and thinking how dreadful your life is, your thinking has become aligned with the pain body and you have become unconscious and vulnerable to the pain body's attack. Unconscious, the way that I use the word here, means to be identified with some mental or emotional pattern. It implies a complete absence of the watcher. Sustained conscious attention severs the link between the pain body and your thought processes and brings about the process of transmutation. It is as if the pain becomes fuel for the flame of your consciousness, which then burns more brightly as a result. This is the esoteric meaning of the ancient art of alchemy, the transmutation of base metal into gold, of suffering into consciousness. The split within is healed and you become whole again. Your responsibility then is not to create further pain. Let me summarize the process. Focus attention on the feeling inside you. Know that it is the pain body. Accept that it is there. Don't think about it. Don't let the feeling turn into thinking. Don't judge or analyze. Don't make an identity for yourself out of it. Stay present and continue to be the observer of what is happening inside you. Become aware not only of the emotional pain, but also of the one who observes, the silent watcher. This is the power of the now, the power of your own conscious presence. Then see what happens. For many women, the pain body awakens, particularly at the time preceding the menstrual flow. I will talk about this and the reason for it in more detail later. Right now, let me just say this. If you are able to stay alert and present at that time and watch whatever you feel within rather than be taken over by it, it affords an opportunity for the most powerful spiritual practice and a rapid transmutation of all past pain becomes possible. Okay, I'm gonna tell y'all this. The only thing I can think about during that time of the month is I be hungry. I be ready to eat up stuff. So now, because of Eckhart, I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to pay attention. He says, if you are able to stay alert and present and watch whatever you feel, you are able to rapidly transmutate all of your past pain. I know I gotta put a sticky note right here. That's deep. I have an assignment now. I have some confirmations that I've already sticky noted, and now I have an assignment. Pay attention during that time of the month, girl. Ego identification with the pain body. The process that I have just described is profoundly powerful yet simple. It could be taught to a child, and hopefully one day it will be one of the first things children learn in school. Once you have understood the basic principle of being present as the watcher of what happens inside you, and you understand it by experiencing it, you have at your disposal the most potent transformational tool. This is not to deny that you may encounter intense inner resistance to disidentifying from your pain. This will be the case, particularly if you have lived closely identified with your emotional pain body for most of your life, and the whole or a large part of your sense of self is invested in it. What this means is that you have made an unhappy self out of your pain body and believe that this mind made fiction is who you are. In that case, unconscious fear of losing your identity will create strong resistance to any disidentification. In other words, you would rather be in pain, be the pain body, than take a leap into the unknown and risk losing the familiar unhappy self. And y'all, let's keep it real. You know people, or you are one of those people who are always complaining, who are always in some type of mental or emotional or physical pain. This is how they identify. It is through this pain body that some people identify themselves as. And they don't, some people know it, but I think the majority of us humans don't even pay attention to it. We have just accepted it as part of who we are. And it's not. You have a choice. And a lot of people choose pain. If this applies to you, observe the resistance within yourself. Observe the attachment to your pain. Be very alert. Observe the peculiar pleasure you derive from being unhappy. Observe the compulsion to talk or think about it. The resistance will cease if you make it conscious. You can then take your attention into the pain body. Stay present as the witness and so initiate its transmutation. Only you can do this, though. Nobody can do it for you. But if you are fortunate enough to find someone who is intensely conscious, if you can be with them and join them in the state of presence, that can be helpful and will accelerate things. In this way, your own light will quickly grow stronger. When a log that has only just started to burn is placed next to one that is burning fiercely, and after a while they are separated again, the first log will be burning with much greater intensity. After all, it is the same fire. To be such a fire is one of the functions of a spiritual teacher. Some therapists may also be able to fulfill that function, provided that they have gone beyond the level of mind and can create and sustain a state of intense conscious presence while they are working with you. The origin of fear. You mentioned fear as being part of our basic underlying emotional pain. How does fear arise, and why is there so much of it in people's lives? And isn't a certain amount of fear just healthy self protection? If I didn't have a fear of fire, I might put my hand in it and get burned. The reason why you don't put your hand in the fire is not because of fear, it's because you know that you'll get burned. You don't need fear to avoid unnecessary danger, just a minimum of intelligence and common sense. Y'all, I'm giggling inside my head because I could just hear Eckhart saying this and making fun of people. For such practical matters, it is useful to apply the lessons learned in the past. Now, if someone threatened you with fire or with physical violence, you might experience something like fear. This is an instinctive shrinking back from danger, but not the psychological condition of fear that we are talking about here. The psychological condition of fear is divorced from any concrete and true immediate danger. It comes in many forms: unease, worry, anxiety, nervousness, tension, dread, phobia, and so on. This kind of psychological fear is always of something that might happen, not of something that is happening now. You are in the here and now, while your mind is in the future. This creates an anxiety gap. And if you are identified with your mind and have lost touch with the power and simplicity of the now, that anxiety gap will be your constant companion. Kind of like that gap I was talking about. Parents are coming in now because of what has happened to us worldwide, this learning gap that has always existed, but is now greater. But it is greater because we have all lived through the same thing. And that fear is driving parents into our offices trying to fix a problem. That's not a problem. It's life. You can always cope with the present moment, but you cannot cope with something that is only a mind projection. You cannot cope with the future. Moreover, as long as you are identified with your mind, the ego runs your life. As I pointed out earlier, because of its phantom nature and despite elaborate defense mechanisms, the ego is very vulnerable and insecure, and it sees itself as constantly under threat. This, by the way, is the case even if the ego is outwardly very confident. Now, remember that an emotion is the body's reaction to your mind. What message is the body receiving continuously from the ego, the false mind made self? Danger. I am under threat. And what is the emotion generated by this continuous message? Fear, of course. Fear seems to have many causes: fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of being hurt, and so on. But ultimately, all fear is the ego's fear of death, of annihilation. To the ego, death is always just around the corner. In this mind identified state, fear of death affects every aspect of your life. For example, even such a seemingly trivial and normal thing as the compulsive need to be right in an argument and make the other person wrong, defending the mental position with which you have identified, is due to fear of death. If you identify with a mental position, then if you are wrong, your mind based sense of self is seriously threatened with annihilation. So you, as the ego, cannot afford to be wrong. To be wrong is to die. Wars have been fought over this, and countless relationships have broken down. Once you have disidentified from your mind, whether you are right or wrong makes no difference to your sense of self at all. So the forcefully compulsive and deeply unconscious need to be right, which is a form of violence, will no longer be there. You can say clearly and firmly how you feel or what you think. There will be no aggressiveness or defensiveness about it. Your sense of self is then derived from a deeper and truer place within yourself, not from the mind. Watch out for any kind of defensiveness within yourself. What are you defending? An illusory identity, an image in your mind, a fictitious entity? By making this pattern conscious, by witnessing it, you disidentify from it. In the light of your consciousness, the unconscious pattern will then quickly dissolve. This is the end of all arguments and power games, which are so corrosive to relationships. Power over others is weakness disguised as strength. I'm going to read that again. Power over others is weakness disguised as strength. True power is within, and it is available to you now. So, anyone who is identified with their mind and therefore disconnected from their true power, their deeper self rooted in being, will have fear as their constant companion. The number of people who have gone beyond mind is as yet extremely small. So, you can assume that virtually everyone you meet or know lives in a state of fear. Only the intensity of it varies. It fluctuates between anxiety and dread at one end of the scale and a vague unease and distant sense of threat at the other. Most people become conscious of it only when it takes on one of its more acute forms, the ego's search for wholeness. Another aspect of the emotional pain that is an intrinsic part of the egoic mind is a deep seated sense of lack or incompleteness, of not being whole. In some people, this is conscious, in others, unconscious. If it is conscious, it manifests as the unsettling and constant feeling of not being worthy or good enough. If it is unconscious, it would only be felt indirectly as an intense craving, wanting, and needing. In either case, people will often enter into a compulsive pursuit of ego gratification and things to identify with in order to fill this hole they feel within. So they strive after possessions, money, success, power, recognition, or a special relationship, basically, so that they can feel better about themselves, feel more complete. But even when they attain all these things, they soon find that the hole is still there, that it is bottomless. Then they are really in trouble because they cannot delude themselves anymore. Well, they can, but it's a lot much more difficult. As long as the egoic mind is running your life, you cannot truly be at ease. You cannot be at peace or fulfilled except for brief intervals when you obtained what you wanted, when a craving has just been fulfilled. Since the ego is a derived sense of self, it needs to identify with external things. It needs to be both defended and fed constantly. The most common ego identifications have to do with possessions, the work you do, social status and recognition, knowledge and education, physical appearance, special abilities, relationships, personal and family history, belief systems, and often also political, nationalistic, racial, religious, and other collective identifications. None of those things are you. None of those things are who you are. They can be parts of you. They are not you. Do you find this frightening? Or is it a relief to know this? All of these things you will have to relinquish sooner or later. Perhaps you find it as yet hard to believe, and I am certainly not asking you to believe that your identity cannot be found in any of those things. You will know the truth of it for yourself. You will know it at the latest when you feel death approaching. I'm going to share a story with y'all before I read this last sentence and we leave each other today. For the past few months or so, I have experienced fainting spells, so much so that I thought I was dying. And I didn't realize until my most recent fainting spell that it is a mixture. I believe I'll find out tomorrow morning when I go to the doctor to get checked out. It is a mixture of low blood pressure coupled with premenopause and probably dehydration, right? But I will say the last episode when I had no control and I saw myself losing consciousness, I felt it. I really was at peace with life if that was going to be the end of mine. It was a very peaceful fainting spell that I experienced. And I also realized that on the other side of that fainting spell, there was nothing. When I lost consciousness, there was nothing there. There was no revelation of what it would be like to enter the next realm. I just didn't exist anymore for a moment. And I can only imagine that that is what death is like. Your existence just leaves. Your consciousness is gone. This human body that we have fades away. It no longer functions in this world, but your consciousness is no longer inside of it. Am I sure of what happens to your consciousness? Nope. I just I don't know or think that anything happens to it. I just think that it no longer ceases to exist in this human form. But I also somewhere, and I'll learn this as I continue to read, believe that your consciousness lives on in those lives that you touched and what you leave behind and those memories of you. That is where I think that consciousness dissipates into the universe and it spreads. Death is a stripping away of all that is not you. The secret of life is to die before you die and find that there is no death. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I appreciate you. I love you. God willing, I will be back here next week, either Saturday or Sunday, depending on my level of exhaustion with being present at work and in my children's lives and with my family. And we'll pick up and start with chapter 3, moving deeply into the now. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate you. Have a blessed day.